We're not talking. I mean, this is very, very traumatic when you're in the first grade. You know, when and Barbara would kind of rotate. You know, today we're not going to talk to her, and then that girl would feel sort of the wrath of Barbara's clique of friends. I don't know what this was about, but I can speculate that a couple of things. First of all, it sounded to me like she was taking out on others what was being taken out on her by her mother. That's number one. And number two, I felt like she was sort of claiming her power. That she had no power at home. She had no agency in her relationship with her mom or in her family life. And so when she was in school, that's when she claimed her power. And her power was being able to sort of put these chess pieces in order the way that she wanted them to be, and she was, you know, quite the little bully. So I just think it's a psychologically very interesting thing, because you wouldn't think of Barbara Bush that way at all.
Well, you did reference a few minutes ago that she was an unhappy person in her adult life. What contributed to her unhappiness?
You know, like her mom, Pauline, Barbara suffered from clinical depression for her entire life. And also, like her mom, Pauline, it was not discussed. And what I think is interesting is the book that I mentioned earlier that Barbara was writing when she and I first met, her autobiography. When that book finally came out, that was the first time that her children, including George W., ever heard that she suffered from depression. Was when she wrote about it in her book. That's the first time they even recognized that that's what it was. And when you think about the fact that, you know, your kids are like in their 40s and they still don't know that you suffered from depression their entire childhood, that's an amazing thing. And I think it just tells you how much of a stigma was, and still is, but definitely was, attached to depression back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And you know, and so, you know, this depression combined with the lack of self-esteem that was also, you know, something that was a consequence of her mother. The fact that HW was having an affair with another woman for 18 years, and Barbara tolerated that, combined with the death of her child at the age of 3, Robin. All of these things, you know, made for a very often unhappy woman.
And how did you come to discover her husband's infidelity?
Well, you know, I'd like to say that it's funny because if people have said to me, wow, that's such an amazing revelation. It's not, I like to claim it as my own, but it really is not. The fact of the matter is that the affair came to light in 1991 when George Bush was giving a press conference at Kennebunkport with the Prime Minister of Israel. And at that time, he and Clinton were campaigning against each other, and Clinton was dealing with Jennifer Flowers.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And the Clintons, in order to take the focus away from their Jennifer, put focus on the Bush's Jennifer, which was Jennifer Fitzgerald. And the morning of this press conference, the Clintons leaked to a New York newspaper some information about this woman, and the New York newspaper took that information and combined it with somebody else's book and did a front page story about HW's relationship with Jennifer Fitzgerald. And then that day was this press conference. And as I wrote in the book, the Bushes had a feeling that this was going to be asked of them during this press conference. And so what they did was they gathered the entire family together and had them as sort of a backdrop to the president and the prime minister, thinking that nobody would dare ask a question about Jennifer Fitzgerald if the whole Bush family was in the frame. Well,
Did that strategy work?
No, that strategy did not work at all, thanks to the intrepid reporter Mary Tillotson on CNN. If you're old enough to remember Mary Tillotson, you know that she was somebody, and she still is, but back then she was somebody really to contend with. She stood up and just as bold as she could be, asked the president, "Is this true that you had?" And she called it she actually used the word sexual in her question. Did you have a sexual relationship with this woman? And sort of reminiscent of what Bill Clinton would say later on about somebody else, HW said, I never had sex with that woman. And that is completely not true. And that really put this relationship of 18 years into the public domain.
So for Barbara Bush, it wasn't so much that he had the relationship, but that it now was public and something that she had to be embarrassed about.
Yes, I mean, by then, the interesting thing is that by this time the affair was over. So that they were already sort of trying to recover from it, and look, what can I tell you? I mean, I've written about this so many times in my career. These men having affairs, that it's sort of old hat for me, and I often think that, as they say, great men have great flaws. And certainly the Kennedys were known for this, Joseph Kennedy, John Kennedy, Ted Kennedy. Some say Bobby Kennedy. I'm not 100% sure about Bobby, but definitely the rest of them. That it's not unusual for men of power to do this. And it's not unusual for women who are married to them to accept it rather than trash their entire life and everything that they've built together because of this. Certainly Jackie Kennedy's advice to Joan Kennedy was really interesting when I wrote about that in my first Kennedy book, Jackie, Ethel, and Joan, when Jackie said, you have to build a life for yourself despite that. Find a thing to do that is yours and don't worry about that. And I don't know that today that would be considered good advice. But back in 1960, things were different. Things were different.
Attitudes have changed, certainly.
Yeah.
Laura Bush, one of the things that used to strike me about Laura Bush in the years that she was First Lady was that in some ways she was, not necessarily embarrassed by her husband, but she's smarter than her husband. When he said, he would say nuclear, and she would say nuclear. Am I right? What was?
I was not a fan of W's as president, but I became a fan of his with this book. I think that he's a good man with a good heart. No matter what you think of his presidency and the mistakes that were made, which he cops to fully in his book, Decision Points, talks about the fact that he blew it with weapons of mass destruction. And I think that he has accepted these mistakes in his life and has worked hard to reconcile them in his heart. But what I love about W is he and Laura Bush have been married for more than 40 years, and they have such a complete understanding of each other, and of what they've built together as a couple, and of the trials and tribulations that they went through together. And when he met Laura Bush, she was still suffering from post-traumatic stress over the accident that happened when she was 17 years old, and she ran a stop sign, hit a car, and killed another 17-year-old who was a friend of hers named Mike Douglas. And that changed Laura Bush. As you can imagine, it would change any teenager. And she spent many years sort of being a very insular person. As I wrote in the book, she worked in a library. She didn't have a lot of communication with the outside world. She didn't have a date. She, in order to control her life and seize back some of the control from that night, she used to wear the same color clothing. She needed the same food every night. She was just in a rut, and she had wrote about this in her own book, and she was in a rut, and she lived in a very black and white world until she met George W. Bush, who really sort of injected color into this black and white world, and he helped her get past this tragedy in her life, and she helped him, because the family really didn't think that W was the one. They thought Jeb was the one. They thought W was the one who was going to screw things up, and they had no confidence in W. They really did not. I mean, it doesn't overstate it to say that, they really did not have confidence in W as a politician, and they would just have soon he not run, because they thought that he was going to embarrass them in some way, and in some way also taint his father's legacy. Laura didn't feel that way. Laura saw in him from the very beginning such great promise, and she knew that he had the heart of a public servant, and he had good ideas, and he cared about people. And yeah, I mean, he was, he could be sort of a bumbling kind of guy. He had a lot, all the Bushisms. If you Google Bushisms, you'll see the long list of the wrong phrases and the mixed up words and all of that. But Laura Bush really felt that he had what it takes, and she encouraged him, and she was at his side. As when he became governor of Texas, and then when he became president of the United States.
I'm Gary Shapiro. This is From the Bookshelf on KSCO, and we are talking this week with the New York Times best-selling biographer, J. Randy Taraborelli. His new book is called Grace and Steel, Dorothy, Barbara, Laura, and the Women of the Bush Dynasty. We'll continue our conversation with Randy Taraborelli right after this.
User-friendly computing is Santa Cruz County's top-rated IT service and solutions provider since 1993. Here's one: service and repair. Whether it's hardware, software, servers, or a workstation, we'll fix it and find you a new one. Managed services. Optimize and protect your infrastructure with 24/7, 365 proactive monitoring. Cloud solutions. Cloud IT is the future of small and medium business technology management. Website design. Engage customers and grow your business with tools to update your own content. Backup and recovery. Ensure business continuity with a comprehensive backup and disaster recovery plan. Finally, security and compliance. Advanced security systems help protect your data and keep your business up and running. There's only one place to go for all your computer and IT solutions. User-friendly computing. 505 River Street in Santa Cruz. Peter and his friendly staff will call at 831-423-9653. And be sure to tell them you heard about it on KSCO.
Hi, registered pharmacist Ben Fuchs here. I've been studying healthy bodies for 35 years. What I've got to tell you may shock and surprise you, but if you listen up, it may change your life. Contrary to common wisdom, estrogen, considered by medical professionals and lay people alike as a hormone of femininity, is actually associated with stress and many health challenges, including weight gain, cysts, fibroids, and autoimmunity. One of the most effective estrogen-balancing dietary supplements is the herb
He's the author of many great biographies, including his new one, Grace and Steel, Dorothy, Barbara, Laura, and the Women of the Bush Dynasty. President Bush and Laura Bush have two daughters that I read about in the book. Tell us a little bit about them.
Well, I think that the two daughters are really interesting because they remind me of both their mother and father. I don't think Laura Bush would have ever become a public servant had it not been for W. That just was not in the cards for her. And both of these women, Jenna and Barbara, we're talking about, they're not really public servants, but they have, again, the heart of public service. And they're not going to be politicians, but they care about people. And they're sort of a perfect combination of their parents. And they also remind me a lot of their grandmother, Jenna. Because Jenna Welch, Laura's mom, was such an incredible woman, West Texas woman. What I love most about her is that, she and her daughter, Laura, used to lay out on a blanket and just look at the stars. Because Jenna was very fascinated with astronomy. And they would look at the stars, and Jenna would tell Laura the names of each of the stars. And Laura was a little girl. Jenna would say to her, this is a big world, and you don't have to stay here in Texas. Like, you should go out to see the rest of the world. It's so unusual when you think about it, because most mothers, I think in the 1960s, would have wanted their daughters to stay close to home. Most mothers would have said, find a nice boy and stay in the neighborhood. Not go out and explore. But Jenna was just such an interesting woman, and she would tell Laura, if you go out and you find that West Texas is the place for you, then come back and live here for the rest of your life. But you need to see the world. And it's funny because Laura's position was, I don't really want to see the world. Laura's position was, I love it here, and I would love to stay here. So Laura was more traditional than her mom. And that's what I think is so interesting about these women in this book, is that they're never what you think they're going to be. Just like Barbara and Dorothy don't have the relationship that you think a mother-in-law and a daughter-in-law would have. Laura and Jenna didn't have the relationship that you would have thought mother and daughter in West Texas would have. You would have thought it would have been the daughter who would say, I need to get out of here. I can't stay here for the rest of my life. And the mother say, no, please, don't leave. It was the other way around. And that's what I love about the women in this book, is that, they're so paradoxical, and so they defy expectation.
I was very interested to read about Columba Bush, Jeb Bush's wife. That was an interesting story too. You really delve into the entire family in this book. Tell us a little bit about her and Jeb.
Well, I love that story too. I don't know. I love these people in a way that probably a biographer is not supposed to love their subjects, because Columba was, they met when they were like 16 years old, and Jeb was in Mexico for a school sort of excursion, and he met her, and she didn't speak English, but she just had something. She believed in him in the same way that Laura would later believe in W. Even though the family felt that Jeb had what it took to be a politician, he was a terrible student, and they were frustrated with his scholastic blunders and his bad grades. And it wasn't until Columba came into his life that he really began to apply himself to college. And it wasn't until she came into his life that he began to see for himself who he really was. And she brought that out of him. And he wanted to marry her. And Barbara and H.W. were not thrilled about this, because there had never been a wedding in the family. And they didn't want the first wedding to be to someone they didn't even know, because they hadn't even met her when he proposed. And in fact, HW didn't meet Columba until the night of the rehearsal day, which was the night before the wedding. And, but they really didn't have any choice. I mean, one of the things about the Bush men in particular is, they're very, very independent and very determined to strike their own course. Even if the family wasn't going to hold them back. And that's what Jeb did. I think what's interesting about Jeb and Columba is that their marriage very much mirrors the marriage that HW had with Barbara. Whereas W and Laura is very much like the marriage that Prescott had with Dorothy. So by that I mean that in the same way that HW sort of ruled the roost with Barbara,